Your wife is still alive. The voice on the phone was as cold and impossible as the empty hall, with her portrait behind his back. In that same second, Evan Hargreaves' world, which thought it had buried its life in white marble and roses, cracked. Apartment. The call came at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had started like every other Tuesday since the funeral. Evan stood in his corner office, 47 floors above Manhattan, watching tiny people move like ants across the street. The Hargreaves Industries logo gleamed from every surface. Coffee mugs, letterheads, the marble reception desk downstairs, where security guards nodded respectfully at his Armani suits and Swiss watch. But now his hand trembled. The phone felt like ice against his ear. Who is this? Static. Then, someone who knows what really happened on Route 9 that night. The line went dead. Evan stared at the phone, his reflection fractured across its black screen. Behind him, Claire's portrait smiled from the wall, the official one they'd commissioned for the memorial fund. Professional lighting, perfect makeup, not a strand of her auburn hair out of place. Nothing like the woman who used to steal his hoodies and eat cereal straight from the box while watching late-night infomercials. Had he imagined that voice? The stress of running the company, the board meetings, the constant questions about the future of Hargreaves Industries. Maybe it was finally getting to him. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Hargreaves, the car is here for the cemetery. Right. The monthly visit, the one the PR team had suggested to maintain public sympathy and honor her memory. As if grief operated on a schedule. 20 minutes later, Evan stood before the Hargreaves family mausoleum, a monument of white marble that cost more than most people's houses. Flowers arranged by professionals created perfect geometric patterns around the structure, each bloom positioned to photograph well from every angle. Even in death, the Hargreaves family maintained appearances. She was beautiful. Evan turned. A small boy, maybe 8 years old, stood behind him. Dust covered his faded Marvel t-shirt, and his sneakers had holes in the toes. What was a kid doing in Woodland Hills Cemetery? This wasn't exactly a playground. Excuse me? The boy pointed at the engraved portrait on the marble facade. The lady, she was really beautiful and nice. Something cold settled in Evan's stomach. You knew her? She came to the shelter sometimes. Mama cleans offices there. The boy stepped closer, and Evan caught the scent of laundry detergent and something else. Hospital antiseptic. She said she was working on something important, something that would help kids like me. The world tilted. Claire had never mentioned visiting any shelter. She'd been busy with her charity work, sure, but that was all board meetings and fundraising galas, wasn't it? What's your name, son? Noah. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled hospital bracelet and an old photograph. She gave me these. Said if anything ever happened to her, I should give them to the man in the fancy suits who came to visit her picture. Evan's breath caught. The bracelet was plastic, institutional white, with Claire's name typed in block letters. C-L-A-I-R-E-M. Hargreaves. But the date stamp made his vision blur. The bracelet was dated 3 days after her funeral. The photograph was worse. It showed Claire holding a baby, Noah, but younger, maybe 3 years old. She wore scrubs, not the designer clothes she'd favored. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she looked tired, but genuinely happy in a way Evan hadn't seen in years. Where did you get this? But Noah had already started walking away, his small figure disappearing between the towering monuments of the wealthy dead. Evan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Channel 7, live feed. Now, he opened his phone's browser with shaking fingers. Channel 7's website showed a breaking news banner. New evidence in Hargreaves' death. Below it, a grainy parking lot security camera video played on loop. The footage showed Claire's white BMW, the same one they'd identified from the wreckage. But this camera angle revealed something the police investigation had missed. After the impact, the car doors opened. Someone helped Claire out of the driver's seat and into a waiting van. The timestamp showed this happened 40 minutes before first responders arrived at the scene. Evan watched the video 3 times before the implications sank in. Claire hadn't died in that crash. Someone had pulled her from the wreckage. Someone had let everyone believe she was dead. But who? And why? His phone rang again. Same unknown number. Did you watch the news? The voice was different this time. Female. Familiar. Who is this? Someone who worked very closely with your wife. Meet me at Rossetti's Diner on Broad Street. 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead again. Rossetti's Diner occupied a corner lot that had seen better decades. Red vinyl booths held together with duct tape, a coffee pot that probably hadn't been cleaned since the Reagan administration, and a jukebox that only played songs from before Evan was born. It was the kind of place where nobody would expect to find the CEO of Hargreaves Industries. The woman sitting in the back booth wore a nurse's uniform and had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She looked up when he approached, and her expression shifted to something between sympathy and wariness. "Margaret Chen," she said, extending her hand. "I was Claire's supervisor at General Hospital. Night shift." Evan slid into the booth across from her, his mind reeling. Claire didn't work at General Hospital. She did charity work. Margaret's laugh was bitter. "That's what she told you. Actually, she spent 4 nights a week in our pediatric ward, documenting everything, every suspicious injury, every family that couldn't afford treatment, every time someone tried to cover up medical negligence." She paused. "Every time your company's insurance policies denied claims for dying children." The words hit like physical blows. "That's impossible." She kept detailed records, video testimonials, financial documents showing how Hargreaves Industries' healthcare subsidiary systematically rejected claims from low-income families. Margaret leaned forward. She was going to expose it all, until someone decided she knew too much. Someone like who? Before Margaret could answer, the diner's bell chimed. A man in an expensive suit entered, scanning the room with predator's eyes. Margaret went pale. "We need to leave. Now." They slipped out through the kitchen, Margaret leading him through a maze of back alleys. His Italian leather shoes weren't designed for running, and his lungs burned from months of boardroom air conditioning instead of exercise. "My apartment," Margaret gasped, pointing to a fire escape. "3rd floor." Margaret's apartment was tiny but clean, filled with medical textbooks and children's drawings taped to the refrigerator. She poured 2 glasses of water with shaking hands, while Evan tried to process everything. "Claire came to me 6 months before she died," Margaret said. "She'd discovered that your company was using shell corporations to deny medical coverage to families who couldn't fight back legally. Kids were dying because of paperwork tricks and bureaucratic delays." Evan's throat felt raw. "I never knew about any denial schemes. Maybe not consciously, but your signature was on the policy changes. Your CFO, David Morrison, was the architect of the whole system." She pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. Claire spent months collecting evidence. She was going to hold a press conference the week after she died. Morrison, Evan's oldest friend, his college roommate, the best man at his wedding, the one person he'd trusted completely with the company's finances. "Where is she now?" Margaret's expression softened. "I don't know. After the staged accident, she disappeared. But she's alive, Mr. Hargreaves, and she's still fighting." That night, Evan sat in his study surrounded by financial reports and legal documents, seeing his company's operations through different eyes. Every quarterly report, every policy change, every decision Morrison had recommended. It all looked different now. How had he been so blind? His computer chimed. A new email from an untraceable address. The subject line read, "The truth has a price." The message contained a single link to a live video feed. The camera showed a small, windowless room. Claire sat at a metal table, wearing civilian clothes and looking older than he remembered. But she was unmistakably alive. Behind her, a man in a ski mask held up a sign. "Tell them the truth, or she disappears forever." Claire looked directly into the camera. "Evan, I know you're watching. I know this must be confusing and painful. But you need to understand, I didn't die in that car accident because I was never meant to survive it. Someone tried to have me killed because I was going to expose how our company's policies were murdering children for profit." The masked figure behind her shifted impatiently. "I have 6 months of documented evidence showing how Hargreaves Industries systematically denied healthcare coverage to families who couldn't afford legal fights. David Morrison created shell companies specifically to make the denial process so complex that people would give up or die before receiving care. 12 children died last year alone because of these policies." Evan's hands clenched into fists. Morrison's face flashed through his mind. Their golf games, their business dinners, the casual way he'd always explained away the necessary restructuring of their healthcare division. I staged my own death because it was the only way to gather more evidence without being stopped. But now I need you to do something, Evan. I need you to choose between protecting your company's image and protecting the truth. The video feed cut out. Within minutes, Evan's phone exploded with calls. The board members, the PR team, legal counsel, everyone wanted to manage the crisis. But Evan ignored them all. He had one call to make. David Morrison's office. Put him on, now. A pause. Mr. Hargreaves? David's in a meeting with... I don't care if he's having dinner with the Pope. Put him on the phone. Another pause. Then Morrison's familiar voice, smooth as always. Evan, buddy, I saw the news. Don't worry, we can handle this. PR nightmare, sure, but nothing we can't spin. Some disgruntled employee probably hired an actress to... Cut the shit, David. I know. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Know what? About the shell companies, the denied claims, the children who died. Evan's voice was steel. I know everything. Even, listen to me very carefully. You're having an emotional reaction to fake evidence planted by someone trying to destroy our company. Claire is dead. She died in a car accident. This video is fake, and these documents are forgeries designed to... Her medical bracelet was dated 3 days after the funeral. The silence returned, heavier this time. That proves nothing. Someone could have made... A 8-year-old boy gave it to me at her grave. He knew her personally. She'd been working nights at General Hospital for 6 months, documenting everything you did. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was different, colder. You don't understand the position you're putting us in. These policies saved the company millions. Without those cost-cutting measures, we'd be bankrupt. Sometimes hard decisions have to be made. Hard decisions? You're talking about children's lives. I'm talking about business reality. Claire never understood that. She was too emotional, too idealistic. She would have destroyed everything we built together. The admission hit like a sledgehammer. Morrison wasn't denying it anymore. He was justifying it. So you decided to kill her. I decided to protect our interests. The car accident was supposed to look clean, final. But your sentimental wife was tougher than expected. She survived and went underground, instead of just dying quietly like she was supposed to. Evan's hand tightened on the phone. 30 years of friendship, dissolved in a single conversation. Where is she, David? Safe, for now. But that depends entirely on your next move, old friend. You can either help us resolve this situation quietly, or you can watch your company, our company, get destroyed in the media circus that follows. Your choice. The line went dead. Evan stared at his reflection in the dark window. Outside, Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold. Somewhere in that maze of lights, his wife was being held captive by his oldest friend. Somewhere else, children were dying because of policies he'd unknowingly signed. How many times had Morrison brought him documents to sign? How many times had Evan just trusted his friend's judgment without reading the fine print? He'd been so focused on the big picture, the quarterly reports, the stock prices, that he'd never looked closely at the human cost of their efficiency improvements. His computer chimed again. Another email, this one from a major news network. Mr. Hargreaves, we've received a package containing extensive documentation regarding Hargreaves Industries' healthcare policies and their connection to your wife's alleged death. We'd like to give you an opportunity to comment before we run the story tomorrow morning. Please call at your earliest convenience. Then his phone buzzed. A text from the same untraceable number. Warehouse 47, Red Hook. Come alone. Midnight. Last chance. Evan checked his watch. 11:15 p.m. The warehouse district of Red Hook felt like the edge of the world. Streetlights created islands of yellow in an ocean of shadows, and the Hudson River lapped against rotting pier supports, with sounds like whispered secrets. Warehouse 47 squatted between abandoned lots, like a concrete tumor. The front door was unlocked. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over a vast empty space, broken only by concrete pillars and scattered pallets. Evan's footsteps echoed as he walked deeper into the building, following the sound of voices. He found them in a makeshift room, constructed from shipping containers. Claire sat in a metal chair, her hands zip-tied behind her back. Morrison stood beside her, no longer the friendly golf partner, but someone Evan didn't recognize. 2 other men in suits flanked the scene. Corporate security, probably, though they looked more like the kind of security that didn't appear on any official payroll. Evan. Morrison's smile was the same one he'd worn during their college years, during their wedding toasts, during every board meeting. I was hoping we could resolve this privately. Let her go, David. First, we need to come to an understanding. Morrison gestured to a laptop on a nearby table. The screen showed financial documents, email chains, video testimonials from families whose insurance claims had been denied. Your wife has been very busy. This represents enough evidence to destroy not just our company, but dozens of other corporations using similar cost management strategies. Claire looked up at Evan, and her eyes were the same green he'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm sorry I had to lie to you, but I couldn't tell you what I was discovering without putting you in danger too. Why didn't you trust me? Because I wasn't sure whose side you'd choose. Tears tracked down her cheeks. Your signature was on every policy change, Evan. Every denial protocol. I thought you knew. The words cut deep because they were fair. He had signed those documents. He had trusted Morrison's recommendations without question. In his ignorance, he'd been complicit in everything. The solution is simple, Morrison said, interrupting their reunion. We delete this evidence, Claire disappears permanently this time, and you announce that the recent videos were elaborate hoaxes created by disgruntled employees. The company survives, the stock price recovers, and everyone moves on. Except for the families whose children died. Morrison shrugged. Acceptable losses. The healthcare industry is brutal, Evan. You can either play the game or get destroyed by it. And if I refuse? Then Claire dies for real this time, you get framed for her murder, and the evidence still disappears. The only difference is that you go to prison instead of staying rich. Evan looked at his wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. When had she gotten so thin? When had those lines appeared around her eyes? She'd been carrying this burden alone while he'd been playing golf and attending charity galas. There's another option, he said slowly. Morrison raised an eyebrow. I call the FBI, turn over all the evidence myself, and testify against everyone involved in the fraud scheme. Evan pulled out his phone. Starting with you. You'll destroy everything we built. We didn't build anything, David. We just learned how to steal from people too poor to fight back. Morrison's expression hardened. He nodded to one of the security men, who pulled out a gun. I really hoped we could do this the easy way. But Evan had already dialed 911. This is Evan Hargreaves, CEO of Hargreaves Industries. I'm at Warehouse 47 in Red Hook, and I need immediate police assistance. My wife is being held hostage, and I have evidence of a massive insurance fraud scheme that's resulted in multiple deaths. The security man with the gun looked confused, glancing between Morrison and Evan. This wasn't in his job description. Hang up the phone, Morrison said quietly. Can't do that, old friend. The next few minutes moved like a fever dream. Morrison lunged for the laptop containing the evidence while his security team tried to decide whether kidnapping and murder were really worth their salaries. Claire somehow freed herself from the zip ties. Apparently, months of working in hospitals had taught her a few things about medical restraints, and tackled Morrison before he could delete the files. By the time the police arrived, they found Morrison zip-tied to a chair with his own restraints, his security team sitting docilely on the floor with their hands visible, and Evan holding Claire while she uploaded 6 months of documented evidence to every major news outlet simultaneously. The arrests happened quickly after that. Morrison's corporate security turned out to be surprisingly eager to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. The shell companies unraveled under federal investigation. The families of children who died due to denied claims filed wrongful death lawsuits that would keep the courts busy for years. Hargreaves Industries' stock price collapsed, but Evan discovered he didn't care about that as much as he'd expected. 3 months later, he sat in a much smaller office, the headquarters of the Hargreaves Foundation, a nonprofit focused on providing free legal assistance to families fighting insurance denials. The office was in Queens, not Manhattan, and the coffee came from a machine that actually worked instead of a service that cost more per cup than most people made in an hour. Claire's desk sat across from his, covered with case files and thank you letters from families they'd helped. She looked up from her work and smiled, the same smile from that old photograph Noah had given him, genuine and tired and happy all at once. Any regrets? She asked. Evan considered the question. He'd lost his company, most of his wealth, and several friendships that had apparently been built on convenience rather than affection. But he'd gained something more valuable: the ability to sleep at night without wondering whose suffering had paid for his comfort. "Just one," he said. "What's that?" "I regret that it took losing you to find out who I really was." Claire walked around the desk and took his hands. Her wedding ring caught the light, the simple gold band she'd worn throughout their marriage, not the expensive upgrade he'd bought her for their 10th anniversary. "You didn't lose me," she said. "You just had to be willing to look for me in places you'd never thought to search." Outside their window, Queens hummed with the sounds of people living actual lives instead of managing appearances. Somewhere in that noise, children were growing up with parents who could afford their medical care. Somewhere in that chaos, families were staying together because they didn't have to choose between bankruptcy and watching their loved ones die. The truth, Evan had learned, didn't always set you free. Sometimes it just gave you a different kind of prison, one with walls made of responsibility instead of ignorance. But at least in this prison, when he looked in the mirror, he recognized the man staring back. His phone buzzed. A text from Noah. "Mama says thank you for helping her get the new job at the real hospital. Also, she says you and the pretty lady should come to my birthday party next week. Mama makes really good cake." Evan showed the message to Claire, who laughed. The first genuinely happy sound he'd heard from her since before she'd started working nights at General Hospital. "We should go," she said, "to a 8-year-old's birthday party in a neighborhood where I definitely don't belong. To a place where people tell the truth about who they are." Evan smiled. After everything they'd been through, that sounded like the best destination possible. The truth, as it turned out, didn't have a price after all. It just had a cost. And for the first time in his adult life, Evan Hargreaves was wealthy enough to afford it.